today I'm going to talk about this title here, Talent Imitates, Genius Steals. And it's going to be in English, so I'll go slowly. But if you don't understand, I can go a lot slower. Or I can do it in German. So, first, ich bin Geld. Ich bin auch Geld. Ja? Doppeldeutend. Okay. So I think what's important is my whole premise today is it's about hybrid culture and about stealing and about kind of about copyright, but not really. But more about the fact that when things become more digital, it kind of puts a big wall in front of capitalism, because all of a sudden everything is potentially free and there's no distribution problems and whatnot. So I think we're up for some interesting times. So first I'm going to talk about how kids learn. So for those of you that have kids, or if you ever have watched kids, you know that kids like to imitate other people. So first I'm going to show you a few videos here to prove my theory. You guys know this guy? This is Hassan Baba, the Apache dance. And watch on the what's important here is to watch on your left side, because that's the important thing. Although Hassan's kind of interesting too. So what's interesting there is obviously the guy's dancing, but as you see the little kid there, he starts imitating his dad. So here's another example of how kids imitate. And this way it's more current. So this is Kathy May 15. She's from Norway, and this is kind of viral. So if any of you are really into digital culture, you'll know what 4chan is and V and whatnot. But if you're not, then maybe you want to stay away from that.
Boom, boom, boom. Now let me hear you say, way-ho. I say boom, boom, boom. Now everybody say, way-ho. I say boom, boom, boom. Now let me hear you say, way-ho. I say boom, boom, boom. Now everybody say, way-ho. Boom, boom, boom. Now let me hear you say, way-ho. I say boom, boom, boom. Now everybody say, way-ho. I say boom, boom, boom. Now let me hear you say, way-ho. I say boom, boom, boom. Now everybody say, way-ho.
Then we have the video that's not available in our country. That's I mean, and that's kind of the problem we're facing now. We have companies like or industries or to name it like Gema, and people want their content, but we can't get it because there's people that want money for that content. So, but obviously there's ways around that, like BitTorrent. So the point is, I think we learn by copying things, and I think as soon as digital itself it's a medium where it's made for copying. 1-0, it's a perfect copy, and it's something that everyone's kind of facing now. So if you're in media or if you're in advertising or if you're in music, if you're still in the music industry, you start to realize that there's some major challenges ahead, and I think that's interesting. So the point here is that's how we learn. We learn by copying. And the title here, my title is Talent Imitates, Genius Steals, and that's the little star there, that's the footnote. And that title itself is stolen as well from this guy. And if some of you guys are planners, you might know who he is. His name is Ferris, and he's from MDC, but he talks also about incumbent culture and copyright. But he took that title from this guy, T.S. Eliot, and T.S. Eliot says, immature poets imitate, mature poets steal. And the point there is when you take something, it's not just to take it and just make it your own, but take it and go further with it. And his big book or his groundbreaking book is called The Wasteland. And he referenced a bunch of sources like the Bible and other sources. And here's a little snippet.
April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain.
And then if we move further, this whole idea of copying and cutting and pasting, here we have William Burroughs. He came up with the cut-up technique after the Dadaist. And what he did is he took pieces of paper and cut things up and then put them together and created new stories or tried to create new formats for writing.
When I came across the, to me, happy accident of the cut-ups.
There are, of course, many ways in which cut-ups can be done. One very simple way that I've used frequently is just take a page, cut it down the middle, and across the page, so you now have 4 sections, and you rearrange the sections in a different order. And when this happens, of course, you get new word combos. You also get new words created by
It occurred because I had a number of sheets of newspapers, some British newspapers, American newspaper published in Paris, and some other things that happened to be lying on my desk. And I took a Stanley blade and cut through them, and these little bits and pieces looked so amusing to me that I started jiggling them around as one would.
So that guy talking there, that's his friend Brian. He's a painter, and he together with Burroughs, they kind of came up with this idea of this cut-up format. And the point with that is with everything digital, it's a lot easier. It's no longer, you don't have to take out your blade or anything. You just have to use just copy and paste stuff. It's super easy now. And to take that even further, if we think about that line, there's this book called Tree of Codes. Do you guys know this? So basically, he took a book, and then he wanted to create a story out of the existing book, and he used a production company and cut out different pages or different sentences from the book and made a whole new narrative based on the existing book. So this is people's reaction to it.
Wow.
Wow.
Nice messed up.
Very interesting. Actually, it's kind of amazing. It's amazing.
It's awesome. And my eyes are kind of darting from the stuff that's on this page to the stuff that's not.
Is the whole book like that? Oh my gosh.
So weird. Okay, I'm getting the hang of it now.
Actually, I've never seen anything like that ever.
Is the book actually meant to be like that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's written to be like that.
That's just mad.
I don't know if anybody's going to go and bother to do this.
So I think it's possible to take, because people, I think one thing is the music industry and publishing houses and media companies have is this issue of copyright. And I think people will take stuff if they want to take stuff, and digital just makes it easier for people to take stuff. So you can't really block things. But for example, we just got an Apple TV at home, and it's super easy now to order films and stuff. But before it was a little harder, so we would use P2P networks and stuff. But I think if you offer a platform where people it makes it easier for them to purchase things, then people will use it. In general, people don't like to steal if there's an alternative not to stealing. And I think that's where the music industry kind of fucked up, to be honest, is they didn't offer anything alternative to Napster, and in the end they started suing the people that wanted the music. So that's the reason where they are right now. So to take that another step further is obviously this quote from Picasso, and he says, "Good artists copy and great artists steal." And his point is also similar to T.S. Eliot. It's not so much about copying things; it's about taking things and taking it further than what the original was before. So an example here is we have a Coons, the inflatable rabbit, and this was in 1986. And then we have another artist that kind of reinterpreted that in his style. His name is, well, it's the deflated rabbit, basically. And it's the same thing, but I think it takes it a step further than the original. And his whole point there is, I always think that art is about ideas, and surely the idea of an original and a copy of an original are two different very things. So even if you copy something, it's still going to be different than the original. So you might not take it any further if it's just a one-to-one copy, like these guys in China. So these guys, obviously, they just have masterworks or paintings, and they just copy one-to-one. But even their copy is a little bit different because it has a different flavor than before. So I don't think in the analog world there's not a perfect copy. In the digital world there is a perfect copy. And then we go to computing, and this is obviously, or maybe not so obvious, but it's Steve Jobs when he was a little heavier. And Steve Jobs and Apple are known for basically stealing stuff and then reusing it for their things. So the first mouse was in 1964, invented by Xerox PARC, Doug Engelbart, and then Apple took that, or Steve Jobs saw that and said, oh, we got to use this thing, it's going to be the new paradigm for computing. And IDEO designed this mouse for the Lisa in 1980. So it's just, basically it's a one-to-one copy. The idea is the same, but it's a little bit different. But if we take that a little further with our, some of you might have seen this, is the comparison between current products and Braun products from the 1960s. So Dieter Rams versus Jonathan Ives. So you have two copies, or two different similar things, but I think Ives is more inspired by what Dieter Rams did in the 60s. I mean, you can definitely see it's from the same family, the same thinking, but it also takes it a step further. And then if you commercialize things, basically, I think that's what advertising does a lot. I think that's my big beef with advertising in general. Is advertising likes to just take things and not really give credit back to who the original person was. And I think you see that in a lot of advertising awards and whatnot. And that's why advertising is so, and in a lot of cases, so bland or is not so culturally relevant, because it is just a plain copy, and they aren't trying to do anything new with it except sell products. Now here's a little history class in computing. Some of you might know who this is or what this is. This is a diagram from Moore, and this is Moore's law. And basically, he says every 2 years, the amount of circuits we can put on a chip is going to double or be exponential. What that means is computers are going to become more powerful, cheaper, and smaller as we move along. And for me, it's not so much about technology, but it's about accessibility. So that when things get cheaper and smaller and more powerful, more people have access to them. So this is a picture of the one laptop per child from Negroponte, and the premise here is we're gonna. He wanted to start a movement where there's this laptop. They manufacture this laptop and it costs less than $100, and they give it away to third world countries, or third world countries would buy it, and then more people have access to the internet. So that's what, for me, Moore's law is obviously it's about technology, but more for me it's about accessibility. And I think that's an overlying factor. When you talk to they get really excited about technology, but in the end it's really about the human connection. I think we forget that sometimes when we're on our devices and whatnot. Any technology that allows us to have a deeper communication or connection with other humans, usually those technologies are going to be adopted sooner than something else. So let's look at the history of computing. This is 1960s, and here the computer would be as big as this room, and we'd all have to share it. So everyone would have to have their own time slot, and there'd be like 3 or 4 people working on it at the same time. So your access was pretty limited. And then in the 1980s, I think most of us, or some of us, can relate to this, where each person has their own computer, but we just have one computer in the personal computer era. And this is the era where we are now. This is a photo I took when I was in Singapore on a trip. And here the point is, it's no longer just about having one computer. It's about having hundreds of computers. So potentially all of us have hundreds of computers. So if you have a car with GPS or a telephone or a laptop or an iPad or whatever it might be, we all have multiple computers. And and they're just becoming smaller, cheaper, and faster. And that's what I personally think is interesting, was when technology becomes pervasive or it disappears in the background. So when you woke up today and you put on your clothes and you had your zipper on your pants or on your jacket, that is technology, but that's something we forget about because it just disappears in the background. And that's when technology becomes interesting, is when you don't think about it as technology. And I think that's also a point where working together with technologists, they get very excited about technology and what the possibilities are. But I think you always have to balance it with the human side or with the art side, because I think for me, that's the harder thing. Technology for me is either 1 or 0. You can either do it or you can't do it. Usually you can do it if you have enough money and time. But the art side is more subjective. It's harder to nail, the art side of it. So to go back to this, right now we're in the 2000s, and I know we're moving to this era called the ubiquitous era, pervasive computing, and that means when computers disappear in the background. And here's a video from Iron Man. Some of you guys might know him. And this is where the computer just follows what he does, and input is through gestures. And I think that's when things become interesting, when you don't have to think about going to sit down at your desktop computer and grabbing your mouse and playing with your keyboard and whatnot, when you can just act normal or somewhat normal and just kind of do what you want to do through the gestures. So here's an example. In the end there, you saw he took this this piece of light, or this what it was symbolizing information, and he put it in something, and then it interacted with these physical things. And that's another trend that's happening right now is the crossover between digital and physical. I think that's happening because computers are becoming cheaper. More people can play with computers and actually do physical things with them instead of just software. So here's a rendering or an idea from I guess it's a design collective. And basically, their whole premise is we're going to create robots that are more like design objects. So they aren't going to be robots that we're used to, but we're going to create objects that are just more like design. And they're going to be powered by living things like flies or mice or something. So here's an example, or here's a video of that stuff.
Domestic robots, exploring both the aesthetics and functionality that may elicit a symbiotic coexistence with people in their homes. To suit the domestic environment, we have avoided the stereotypical look normally associated with robots and adopted a contemporary design aesthetic. In this way, they operate as exclusive furniture and household accessories. The robots gain their energy from a microbial fuel cell, a device that uses an electrochemical reaction to generate electricity from organic matter. This organic matter comprises flying insects and rodents. No longer a nuisance, flies and mice become protagonists, participants in a domestic game of life with a human audience looking on, anticipating the spectacular moment when the prey is captured and slowly transformed into moving energy bars on the graphic displays built into some of the objects. The robots are semi-autonomous and to a degree living entities that exist in a similar way to an exotic pet such as a snake or lizard. They provide a dark form of entertainment, competing with the spectacle of life as seen in television programs such as 24, Big Brother, or Wife Swap. As consumers of these programs, we have the potential to be repulsed, engaged, or both. They are currently built as a series of 5 prototypes. The Mousetrap Coffee Table Robot. Crumbs and food debris left on the table attract mice who gain access to the tabletop via a hole built into one oversized leg. Their motion activates an iris built into the tabletop, and the mouse falls into the microbial fuel cell housed underneath. This generates the energy to power the iris motor, sensor, and the small graphic display housed on the front of the table. The lampshade robot. Flies and moths are naturally attracted to light. This lampshade has holes based on the form of the pitcher plant, enabling access for the insects but no escape. Eventually they expire and fall into the microbial fuel cell underneath. This generates the electricity to power a series of LEDs located at the bottom of the shade. These are activated when the house lights are turned off. The cobweb robot. This robot encourages spiders to build their webs within its armature. Flies that become trapped in the web are tracked by a camera. After no movement has been sensed for 10 minutes, the robotic arm moves over the dead fly, picks it up, and drops it into the receptacle above the microbial fuel cell. This generates electricity to partially power the camera and robotic arm. This robot is not self-sufficient and relies on the UV fly killer parasite robot to supplement its energy needs. The UV fly killer parasite robot. A microbial fuel cell is housed underneath an off-the-shelf UV fly killer. As the flies expire, they fall into the fuel cell, generating electricity that is stored in the capacitor bank. This energy is made available to the fly stealing robot. The flypaper robotic clock. This robot uses flypaper as its means of entrapment. This paper is placed on a roller mechanism. At the base of the roller, a scraper removes any captured insects. These fall into the microbial fuel cell placed underneath. The electricity generated by the flies is used to power both the motor turning the rollers and the small LCD clock. Each robot will evolve over time via both its programming and owner interventions as the host develops a relationship and understanding of the robot's requirements, perhaps moving it from room to room or even feeding it artificially when energy levels are becoming low. Ultimately, this project is an exploration, an alternative take into how we could live and what we might expect from domestic robots in the...
So I think what's nice about that project is they're dealing with the idea of what robots and how robots can serve us, but it's also sustainable, so it doesn't really take electricity, so you're just using the microbial fuel cell. And then there's actually, I think there's a scientist or a professor that actually came up with this microbial fuel cell, so this thing would actually work. They were building. I don't think I'd like to have a dead mouse on the table. So just as a review, the 4 eras of computing. So in the 60s, it's mainframe. In the 80s, it's personal computer. And then 2000, mobility. And the last one is ubiquitous. And that's where we're going right now. We're between the 2000s and 2020. And it's not so much about what you can do with it, but it's more about accessibility. So as you know, everything is going to become digital. I think I'm fully convinced of that. At least in media, it's going to happen that way, and also in physical things. So if any of you guys have any chance to check out 3D printers and whatnot, you definitely know that manufacturing also has a limited lifetime ahead of it. So when everyone has 3D printers around the corner at the local store, there's a big 3D printer where you can print things out. Then there's no reason to have manufacturing in a different country. So I'm going to show you some things that you guys are familiar with. So Napster, this is Sean Fanning. He kind of killed the music industry, I would say. This is Katrina Fake from Flickr. They made photos social, I would say. But also, if anyone, digital photography kind of killed photography, but like Polaroid and Kodak and stuff. So photos are becoming digital. Books. This is Amazon. This is Jeff Bezos. They ship more e-books right now than they do printed books. Elon Musk, unless you're a car buff or kind of a total sustainable sport kind of geek, then you probably don't know who this is. But he's one of the founders of Tesla, and Tesla makes 100% electric cars based on the Lotus platform. Interesting as well is Daimler Chrysler invested $30 million into his company, his battery company. no explanation needed. But I think Facebook kind of made the way we interact with each other. It's different now. What's interesting with guys like this and Gates and stuff, all of these guys are like super hardcore geeks, I would say. I mean, if you've seen the film, it portrays them differently. But I think most people that are like hardcore programmers, excuse me if any of you guys are like hardcore programmers. I don't see many beards out there, but I think hardcore programmers have they can't really relate to their bodies as well versus like other people. So put it this way, they aren't as social. I don't think they're as social as some of us, some of the people that are not programmers, and it's just the nature of programming. And if you think about it, the programmers, those are the people that are kind of dictating how we communicate with each other now. And a lot of these guys, I don't think Bill Gates had many girlfriends in high school, or maybe Steve Jobs because he was kind of like that. But Wozniak was definitely not interested in girls, I can imagine. So I think that's something we have to think about. Unless you can start programming yourself or really get down into what this really means, when all these geeks, all these programmers are dictating our lives and how we do things, I think we're going to have some issues because I mean a like is not the same as what we're used to, and a like is what they came up with as hardcore geeks that are not really socially outgoing. So and then Dennis Crowley, he's from Foursquare, obviously, so everyone checks in, and this is his second company. His first one was Dodgeball, was bought by Google, so he's a millionaire, and he's going to be a millionaire again. So all these guys are really rich too. Crazy. Steve Jobs with the iPad. Everyone thinks the iPad is going to save the publishing industry. We'll see if that happens. And then I think more important than all these media guys and the cars and all that other stuff is not because I like this guy, but just because it shows that if we embrace or if people recognize that people are actually communicating with these things, then you can actually do something. I think the biggest thing was that Barack Obama, he won the election, not just because of digital, but because he was able to see the opportunity that digital gave him. And I think that's something that in Germany, because I know with the privacy laws and blah, 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 it's a little harder, but I think it's something that we have to recognize is that people there is a digital culture, and a lot of times people are ignoring that. So what this means, this chart, the next chart I show in almost all my presentations, what this means is there's an old scarcity, and in this case, the old scarcity is computing or accessibility. You could even make it be the old scarcity is resources. So before there was only like 3 TV stations or 2 newspapers, but now that's changed because with digital, there's more resources available. So that's going up. So that's no longer scarcity, or in German, Knappheit. This is what I call the neue Knappheit, and that's our attention, unsere Aufmerksamkeit. And that hasn't changed. We're still humans, and we have to decide what's important for us. And we only have 24 hours in a day, but we have all these other things to distract us. And that's something we have to think about is we have to make choices what's more important for us. And if we're going to be on Facebook or MySpace or Street Outside or whatever, we're going to hang out with friends or not do things. And I think this chart has the biggest implications for a lot of companies. They don't really realize it. And then one thing I also believe in is the future belongs. The future belongs to the few of us still willing to get our hands dirty. And that's what I kind of went off on my diatribe with Zuckerberg. Is I think it's important that we get too comfortable, and we have to keep busy and keep trying things. And right now I'm going to show a few examples of what I mean as far as not becoming complacent and just waiting for things to happen, but actually going out and trying and doing things. So I'm going to show 5 examples of work. This is from my wife, Franziska. She's a professor at the Amgatstrasse and the University of Applied Arts in Hamburg, and she did this together with the programming informatic department. Basically, what they do is, she could explain this better, but they basically explore different ways you can use computing and textiles together, and just it's not so much product-oriented, which I think a lot of times things, in schools they become very commercial, but it's just about trying things out. Here's a video. what's interesting here is obviously the outcome, the exhibition. But I think what's the hardest thing is what we're dealing with is, so in this class that she had, it's mostly textile students, so it's mostly girls studying textiles, and then you have the programmer guys, and you have two different cultures, and that's the hard thing. And I think that's everyone in the professional world is dealing with that right now, is how do you gather digital people, in this case programmers, and how do you get them together with in this case textile students, because you have two different cultures, and that's one thing that the hardest thing is to put two different cultures together. This next example is from old professor of mine, Gillian Kempton Smith. Boris knows her as well. And this is dealing with, all these examples kind of deal with, what if we don't have a implicit input device, like a keyboard or a mouse or whatever, and stuff just happens in the background. So this idea of ambience or awareness in the background. So the idea there is basically you have the presence of someone else in your room when they're in a different room, and you don't have to like look at a TV screen or look at a mobile device or a computer. This next example is a project that I worked together with the university as well, with my wife in the informatics department. And here the idea was, how can we create input devices or make something that's aware of someone, but just the input device would be through gestures. So I'm not going to show the whole thing because it's kind of long-winded and short in time, but basically it was quite a large project. We built these tents up, and then we used ambient technology, so it's sensors and Arduinos and a lot of prototyping boards and stuff. It's kind of geeky, but also working together with textile and moda designers and informatics students, the programmers. So I'm just going to focus on one thing. Is this one girl named Svenja? She was creating these you call them cocoons. So, and these things hang from the ceiling, and she was having problems. What should the interaction be? What's the interaction? And basically, my advice to her was, you have to think of real-world situations. Like, so if you get close to a child, the child doesn't know you, this little child, then he'll breathe faster, so he'll become anxious. And that's something I think we have to try to embody into our technology. It's not so much metaphors, but more like characteristics. So, and this is kind of the process. So. She did that little mock-up, and then she did an illustration, and then a scale prototype of it, and then we actually built this up. So it was quite a large project. And then here's the thing when it was done. So the closer you get to it, it would breathe faster, and the further away you would get, it would breathe a little slower. You can see it breathing, so that's that. So the next example is from Chris O'Shea, and he's an artist, and a lot of artists are able to work with technology now because it is cheaper, and there are frameworks, there are stuff that's available, and he works a lot with open frameworks and the Arduino processing board. And in this case, he created, I guess, a school of mirrors, and it would basically, it was about awareness. So when you moved around, the mirrors would follow you. So I'll show you a video. nice here is also the mirrors have a personality. When you move, they follow you. So I'm going to blow through the rest of my presentation. I think we're not asking the right questions when we come up with new interactive works. I think we're basing a lot of our models on previous stuff when there's a lot more opportunities that haven't been done before. So I think we have to start asking the right questions. So my theory is basically old thinking times new technology equals fail. But actually, it's not so much about the technology; it's about the behavior. So it's not old thinking times new technology. It's old thinking times new behavior is a fail. And a lot of times, it happens for anyone that does commercial work. They try to take the old model, the old way of thinking, and try to adjust it to something new, the way people behave now, and that's never going to happen. It's usually going to be a big fail. Example is these two girls from college in the U.S., and this is what we call continuous partial attention. They're never really focused on anything. So a lot of you guys have a telephone, and are when you're sitting with your girlfriends or boyfriends, and you're kind of looking at your phone at the same time. You know how annoying that is, or they know how annoying it is. And here in this case, this is reality right now. So what you're really focusing on, almost a little of everything and a little of nothing at the same time. So here I circled 6 things that are happening, and they could actually be talking to each other, but they aren't as well. So Moore's law, again, maybe it's our greatest asset or our worst distraction. When things become cheaper, more powerful, and more pervasive, then things are going to be all over the place. So here's another theory. I think we're taking things. Yesterday it was about applications and interfaces. It was about form and function. It was about the interface. Today, or as we move ahead into this pervasive era, it's more about transmedia systems. So things that are spread about in different areas and different media. It's about being interoperability and findability. So things have to work together, and you have to be able to find things. So that's about, if some of you programmers are out there, it's about having a good API or just tying things together to legacy systems. And then lastly, it's about a good experience. It's not so much the interface. Where a telephone has an interface, it's about the whole experience. And there's going to be a sacrifice with that, because yesterday it was about control over form and function. Here you can control the form and the function of something, but now it's more about this findability and having things work together. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Here's Steve Jobs again.
It comes down to trying to expose yourself to the best things that humans have done, and then try to bring those things in to what you're doing. I mean, Picasso had a saying. He said, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." And we have, always been shameless about stealing great ideas. And I think part of what made the Macintosh great was that the people working on it were musicians and poets and artists and zoologists and historians who also happen to be the best computer scientists in the world.
I think that's important because some of you might heard this term, the T-shaped people, but I think that's true. I think people that have a very strong vertical axis, so like in this case computer scientists, but they're also very interested in the music and poets and writing poetry, but not just interested in it, but they're actually doing it. And that's what we call, or that's what this term is. It's also coined from IDEO. It's called T-shaped people. And I think those are the people that are going to be doing things in the future. It's not going to be people that are just focused on one thing, but it's going to be the people that have empathy towards other people's disciplines and towards what other people do, but also want to be that. So my T-shape would be, my vertical axis would be designer, and my horizontal axis would be ethnographer or programmer. So I can't program very well at all, but I try, and I think that's the goal. I think you have to try. If you don't try, then it's not worth hanging out long. So do people hear it if the T-shape falls in? So remember, there's 3 things to remember. I think we need to steal things more often, but also take them to a new place. It's not just about stealing things, but taking things we know and then just really working on those and trying new things. Number 2, I think we need to make things. I think we become very complacent sometimes, and we're satisfied for what's being offered. But unless you can actually produce your own things, then you don't really have a choice, or you're given a choice. And lastly, I think it's the questions that matter. I think a lot of times people are looking for the right answers, but in the end, it's all about the question. I think if we don't question enough, then we also become complacent. And when you become complacent and static, then you start to die a little bit. So believe and you shall achieve, or in other words, explain, make things and you shall